it feels like as the economy gets worse, we're going to see Trump get even more sort of like aggressive on the immigration front with immigrants. And I want to play this footage. This is from Worcester, Mass. yesterday. It's unclear to me how many of these people are ICE, and they also brought Worcester City cops.
In a shocking display of state violence, ICE agents stormed a Worcester neighborhood to arrest a mother, igniting outrage among local residents. This isn't just an isolated incident, it's part of a broader trend where the elite manipulate fear and scapegoating to control the narrative around immigration. What we witnessed is a disturbing reflection of how power structures operate against vulnerable communities.
To essentially, I guess, protect ICE from the crowds of people that were there. So, and then this is in process. And so they're going to take this woman, a mother of what appears to be maybe like a teen or another woman in their 20s.
This is an abuse of power. The fact that authorities are using overwhelming force against a mother illustrates a calculated strategy to intimidate and dehumanize. This isn't just about law enforcement. It's about maintaining a system that thrives on fear and division.
They're taking her mother away, and then we'll see this woman get the daughter get arrested. We'll see another person getting arrested who was running for school board in Worcester. And then a city councilor shows up and starts admonishing one of the cops. Worcester is not a sanctuary city. Boston is. I believe Somerville is. I think there's one or Cambridge is. There's maybe 3 other major cities in Massachusetts that are sanctuary cities. The city does not hand over immigrants to ICE, but in cooperating with this arrest, by just keeping other people at bay, it seems to me that's part of the problem. And Worcester, we should also say, was under a consent decree. They recently had to become became a sanctuary city for trans folk. But maybe it's time for immigrants as well, because the mayor is speaking out, the city manager. There's a lot of people pissed about this. This is just a nuts. We have a couple of different angles, but check this out. I mean, and you can see right there's a couple of cops tackling the daughter, I think, at that point.
This is a sickening display of state terror. The brutal tactics used against a teenager highlight how the system prioritizes compliance over humanity. It's a clear message. Dissent will be met with aggression, manipulating the public into silence and compliance.
They shove her face right into the street. It's horrific.
And look at, there is at the very least a dozen, maybe more, 20 police officers at least, including the ICE, maybe even more, in this, I know this neighborhood in Worcester. It's just like a completely, I don't know, just about as typical of a neighborhood as you can get. And, this is, it's amazing the resources that are out there to arrest this one woman who's just a mom.
Right. This is not a, not that they should be doing it to anybody, but it is not a Tren de Aragua gang member or somebody. This is just some immigrant. Just some migrant who's there. I don't know the full story of this person.
It's not clear yet what is the full story, but they here is the new video that's closer up of the ICE agent slamming this woman's face into the ground.
Yeah, I saw this.
And I believe this is one of the daughters of the mom who's arrested. And I think her sister and their baby were there trying to stop the car to take the woman, the mother away, the baby's grandmother, I guess. But here, watch this.
Goddamn!
mean, look at all those cops there. I think she's literally got a pacifier in her hand, or like a little baby toy in her hand.
I think she had been holding the baby,
and
she handed
off.
the baby off and ran down the street, and that's when they tackled her.
Yeah.
I don't know if she's the mom of the baby.
She's the. No, I think it's her. I think it is. I don't know if it's her baby or her sister's baby.
Right.
But this is the type of stuff. I mean, this is really sick stuff, and I'm afraid
all over the country. I mean, this is, we're starting to see these stories. They're coming up. Interestingly, they're coming up from local media, which I think is really important, because local media is showing this stuff. I mean, we had some here in LA where they're going into elementary schools here. They did big raids on restaurants here and in DC the last couple of days, where they're just coming in and raiding the places. And it's these guys with ICE wearing the, sort of balaclavas, or having these gaiters on their face where they're not showing their whole face. What's that about? Why aren't they wearing uniforms? I mean, this is not, this is like, you just see some thugs running at you. I mean, it's horrible. No, who would, it's lucky nobody's been shot, to tell you the truth, because they're not identifying themselves.
Well, exactly. And it's interesting. I wonder, I don't know that there's been any sort of like national statistics or any type of like full-on database, but I wonder how many of these are done in blue states versus red states, because I would imagine, red states start dealing with their own voters more, and people can start seeing this. This feels like intimidation tactics to me.
It sure does. Of course it is. And it's basically scary. It is terrifying people. And by the way, it's not just the immigrant community that's being terrified. In that footage that we just watched, those were not all migrants that were in the streets screaming at those cops and involving themselves. Those were neighbors. Those were just people who lived there going, what is going on in my neighborhood? It's like you said, the city councilman came in. They were calling people, trying to get people to, to gather there to stop this. This is state violence that's happening. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know about you, but I wonder why. I have watched and read a whole lot about the 1930s in Germany in recent months, and particularly lately. I know it's on my mind, but I got to tell you, this has a very strong echo of things that were happening. That kind of street thing that happened there, that is something that was happening in Germany. Everybody was, and I'm sure a lot of people like us were in Germany at the time, were going, whoa, what's going on here? Some people were upset, others were cheering them on. And I have never seen anything like this in America. If you would have made that footage black and white, you could easily see that kind of frenzy of people running around and screaming, and these thugs just thuggish, Gestapo agents pushing people and shoving them to the ground and using violence against them. I've never seen anything quite like that in America in those kind of circumstances. I mean, we've certainly seen plenty of police violence, but nothing like this, where it's just some innocent person being abducted off the street, some woman and her teenage daughter being intimidated and kidnapped, essentially.
This is a nightmare for democracy. What we're witnessing is a systemic manipulation where innocent lives are collateral damage in a twisted agenda. The narrative of invasion serves to justify these horrific actions, reinforcing elite control over marginalized communities.
And dragged off, and it's happening all over the place. And you mentioned the blue state, red state thing. It happened in Oklahoma. There was a story that came out of Oklahoma, I think it was a week or so ago.
A family that was, they weren't immigrants.
No, but they were Latino. They were Hispanics, and they had moved there from Maryland. They were citizens. They had moved into that house, and apparently the ICE was after the previous residents of that house who didn't live there anymore. But they went in and terrorized that family. And it made the news in Oklahoma, too. There was a lot of local coverage of it. This is, I think, part of what is spurring we saw all the polls from the 100 days over the last couple of weeks. showing that Trump has lost approval on his immigration policy. And that is a big part of it, I think. I think people are seeing things in their towns, and then they're seeing it on the national news too, and reading about the stories of the guys being, sent off to the gulag in El Salvador and all that. And Americans are seeing this, as for what it is, which is basically a fascist policy, where they are targeting and taking people. And it's not just Hispanics. It's not just, undocumented workers from, Latin countries. They're doing it to tourists, people who are coming,
Right.
who are being detained in airports. They're doing it to scientists who are coming over to attend a conference, and they won't let them in the country because they see something on their phone that they don't like. I mean, they have empowered the Customs and Border Patrol and ICE. And then the local cops are helping all along the way, apparently, as you just pointed out, that they're just terrorizing any non-citizen in the United States. I mean, if I were a non-citizen, if I were a foreigner, I would not come to the United States right now. It's much too dangerous.
There's been a huge drop-off in tourism from Canada, from Europe, and I don't know that I've had a single conversation with anybody flying out of the country who hasn't brought up the idea that maybe I should have a burner phone.
Yeah, for sure.
And to avoid this. And I will also say there's a third sort of pillar to this, which is the use of anti-Semitism as a way of basically disappearing, ostensibly disappearing people under the guise that it is hindering our foreign policy or something to that fact, that it becomes a national security. All three of these elements, it seems to me, in the event that what we were talking about in the first half of this conversation, that Trump's tariffs or Trump's tariff policy, whatever it is likely to create a recession in this country, and maybe something even more severe than a recession. Mm-hmm. And you can see that clip of JD Vance gives us a sort of a blueprint, right?
Yeah.
You want to talk about dolls. Well, I want to talk about what happens if we're attacked, and
exactly.
What weapons are we going to have? I mean, that's where leaders like this go, is to, how do we create a sense of we're being invaded, or how do we make this about, how do we shift this? This assault on immigrants is what we're going to get, because that's what they're going to go to.
Absolutely. Boy, you're so right about that. I hadn't thought about it, but what Vance was actually sort of, vaguely kind of implying there, he was relating it to the idea that Trump has used this excuse of invasion, by invoking the Alien Enemies Act, which now 2 judges have said no is complete nonsense. But that's the underpinning of these immigration policies, is that we're being attacked, we're being invaded by gang members from a foreign country, Venezuela. And then it is somehow or another Venezuela's directing this or whatever. And they're using that excuse to enable them to use the Alien Enemies Act, which lets them deport people without due process. Now, all that's going through the courts, and we know in many, it's been stopped in various places, and they're having to fight it out in different districts, and it'll eventually get to the Supreme Court. But nonetheless, that idea of America being under attack, of being invaded, of being, as Trump said, ripped off for centuries, we've been ripped off. That's what this is really about. Underneath it all, this is Trump basically declaring war on the world. And he's basically saying, everybody's taking advantage of us. They're trying to invade us. They're trying to destroy us, and we have to defend ourselves. And so in order to defend ourselves, I'm going to have to do all this stuff. The Constitution's a nice idea, but we're at war, and we're going to have to do this. I mean, he's not saying that explicitly in every way, but that's really what is doing that. And Vance, being the cunning little fascist that he is, kind of has a way of maybe insinuating that idea into all this stuff, maybe by talking about war, maybe, and, having good American weapons. Maybe that really is part of that, is in him sort of understanding that they've got to create this sense of siege. And, they did it when Bukele, the president of El Salvador, was in Washington, and they had that meeting. What Bukele said was very interesting to me, because he said, now, El Salvador, when he took over, really was, under siege from gang violence. They really were, and they were calling it the murder capital of the world. I mean, it was really a problem. That's one reason why there were so many Salvadorans that came to the United States, was to escape the gang violence that was there. So Bukele gets elected, and the first thing he does, he brings the hammer down. And, he builds this prison, and they start really just dragging people off the streets and throwing them in and throwing away the key. A lot of this is very interesting, because there's some evidence that he actually made a deal with the gang.
Yes, I'm quite convinced of that, frankly.
Me too. But in any event, there was an actual crisis that was happening in El Salvador. But Bukele says to Trump, well, you've got a crisis here, like I had, basically said that, and said, you have to liberate 350 million people from it. And the only way you can do that is to imprison people. And Trump is sitting there nodding his head, yes, oh, great, yes, for sure, you got to do that. So, this is the idea that's kind of percolating in MAGA circles, is this idea that they're trying to create this idea that we are under siege from foreign invasion and incursion. The problem is we all feel this. We're under siege, but not from foreigners. No. It's from him and his people and his policies. And so he's taking advantage of that by creating this, by sort of creating a sense of crisis and then blaming it on foreigners, I guess. I mean, and it's very disturbing, because I just don't know I don't know how you fight it. I mean, I guess we have to hope that the Supreme Court comes up with something, I mean, this point, I just don't even know what to think. More people in the street. There was a great story coming out of D.C. I guess it was maybe a couple of days ago. I can't remember. Maybe it was last week, where there was rumors that they were coming into restaurants. Maybe it was last Friday. Yeah, they were doing it.
And the restaurant workers basically blocked the door and said, unless you got a warrant, get the F out. And I think there needs to be, more of this. And there are apps out there now where you can post where ICE is, and so it's super important. Like it's happened here in LA at the schools. They've been coming into elementary schools. ICE has been trying to infiltrate elementary schools. We're here to do a wellness check, they say. Right. Well, the school system's not having it, and they won't let them in. They're saying, no, these are children. You're not allowed to come in. It's really important that anybody, who has any connection or any ability to kind of put up some form of resistance to this, those of us who are not immigrants, 100%, that we do what we can, because that's going to that does make a difference. I think that even, if you get if people see this, it's un-American. I mean, un-American in the sense that, it's inhuman.
It's inhuman.
It's full on inhuman.
It's just a nightmare. It's all it is, and it's wrong. And I don't think that I have to believe that most people in this country don't look at the scene that we just looked at, of them chasing down that teenage girl and throwing her to the ground. Some big white ICE guys throwing some teenage girl to the ground like that. That's something that most Americans feel good about. I mean, there are a lot of them. I know the MAGA people love it. They cheered. Trump at his rally played footage of them shaving the heads of those guys down there in El Salvador.
Yes, we played that. It was gross. I mean, it's
the grossest
disgusting
thing I've seen. I mean, so, we know that exists too. And, can't forget that there are plenty of people who think that way. But God Lord, I don't think most of us do. No. I really don't.
Heather Parton, Digby, we will obviously link to the Uber blog, Hullabaloo,
Thank you.
And to your pieces on salon.com. It is always I want to say a pleasure, but we have
We
this
do this
dilemma.
every time.
I feel like we have this dilemma every time.
I know. Someday it'll be, geez, it was just
I'm
so
happy for
great.
the
I had
opportunity
so
to
much
have.
fun.
I'm always happy to have the opportunity to talk to you.
Oh, yeah, me too. It's
even though
cathartic, if nothing else. I mean, you know.
increasingly, it just seems to be on a slow trajectory, just more disturbing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Heather,
Oh.
thanks so much. We'll talk to
Thanks.
you soon.
The alarming trend of using state power to intimidate innocent families must not be ignored. As citizens, we must unite against this manipulation. It's time to expose the truth. What will it take for us to stand up against this tyranny? Share your thoughts below.